First of all, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Janet Yoakum. I'm on the mentorship committee here. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this Zoom for this evening's first virtual mentorship workshop of the year. Noteworthy feedback, strategies for assessment in band, report card writing, and communication with parents with Justine Burke. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge that music is an agent of hope, a dynamic and valuable device that helps us heal and brings us together. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that MBA activities take place on treaty territory. Today, on Treaty 1 land that was earnestly cared for by Indigenous peoples who lived in harmony with it before European settlement. Treaty 1 is the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dane, and Dakota peoples, and is the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that Winnipeg benefits daily from Treaty 3 water that comes from Shoal Lake 40. It is with sincere sentiment that we recognize the mistakes of our recent and distant past. In working towards a Canada that benefits us all, we commit to seeking a greater understanding of Canada's diverse cultural relationships through continued work with the Indigenous communities. We commit to live in ways that honor and respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and we commit to stewarding the land in harmony for all who will come after us. I want to say that I am from Virden, or zooming from Virden, and so I'd like to acknowledge that I live on Treaty 2 land, ancestral lands of the Dakota and Métis people, both of whom still reside on this land. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording today's presentation so we can share it via MBA's YouTube channel later this week for folks who weren't able to join us on the Zoom this evening. We will not share the question and answer portion of the presentation. The MBA mentorship program is designed for early service music educators who are in their first years of teaching band, as well as for experienced educators who have perhaps come to teaching band from another pathway or specialty area. Our team thoughtfully pairs participating teachers, mentees, with an experienced mentor who can help them plan for their year, recommend classroom management tips and strategies, select appropriate repertoire, suggest ideas for starting beginners, plan assessment, report cards, parent-teacher interviews, provide school visits, book buses for festivals, order chairs for concerts, plan a trip. The list is endless. Mentors can observe the mentees in their classrooms and even workshop their students if desired. Involvement can be as simple as someone at the other end of the phone or an email for questions and everything in between. This program is completely customizable depending on the needs of the mentees. We are here to support and help them succeed. There's no cost to participate in this program. The MBA mentorship program is made possible in perpetuity by the George Douglas Mentorship Endowment Fund at the Winnipeg Foundation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this evening. Justine has completed the concurrent Bachelor of Music and Bachelor of Ed degree program at Brandon University in May 2014. The focus of her studies was on middle and senior years instrumental music with a major on piano and a minor on clarinet. Justine is currently in her 12th year of running the grade 5 to 12 program at Carberry Collegiate, where she teaches general music, band, and jazz band. She is a board member of the Manitoba Band Association. She lives in Carberry with her partner Dane and their four-legged furry friend Chuck. In her free time, Justine enjoys camping, baking, kayaking, and playing board games. Justine, thank you for sharing with us this evening. I'm excited to learn from you.
Thanks, Janet. I didn't know that whole bio was going to get read out loud. So yeah, this is noteworthy feedback. So just sort of my thoughts on assessment, strategies for how we get it done when we teach so many kids, some tips on report card writing and communication with parents. So as Janet said, I do 5 to 12 music here in Carberry. So I teach grade 5 and 6 general music, and then 7 to 12 is band and jazz band. So I teach a little bit of everything. And it also means that I do all three different types of report cards. Grade 5 and 6 are different, 7 and 8 are different, and then 9 through 12 are different. So I have experience in all three of those. You look like you have a question about that, Janet.
Just if you have a question was what I was going to say.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a question, you can either just put up your hand or just unmute and start talking, and we'll answer the question as soon as.
Yeah, for sure. I picture this as very much informal. Please ask questions. There's only 3 people, 4 people here, so please just jump in with any questions, or if something I'm talking about is, if we go off in a different way, that's totally fine. I like just yapping about band stuff. So I have kind of an order to what we'll talk about, but I'm happy to go in a different way. So we're going to talk about the purpose of assessment, some strategies I use for just collecting data. Some of that can be the most intimidating when we teach, 100, 200, 300 plus kids, some of us. Parent communication, and then report card comments, kind of my strategies for those. And I've actually just copy pasted a collection of my own comments that you're welcome to steal from. Okay, so the purpose of assessment. Sometimes I get really stuck on, I just need to put a number in their grade book. And I'm working really hard to get away from that and to focus on like the 3 types of assessment. So assessment for learning, your diagnostic assessments, assessment as learning, your self-assessment and peer assessment, and assessment of learning, the more formal summative things. So assessment for is probably where we spend, or at least I spend most of my assessment energy. This is your day to day, like in the moment, what's happening in your class. Sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's a mark written down, and sometimes, most of the time, it's just what we're seeing and commenting on in those moments. So when I do a formal one, I'm really focusing on like specific things. I try to listen for like just notes or just fingers or just the rhythm, maybe not overall big picture things. These could look like just verbal feedback in the moment. That's most of what I do there. It could also be just quick checklists, rating scales, like just quick out of fives. Did they get the notes? Did they get the rhythm? Or maybe quick entrance or exit slips, just simple little questions that kids come in and answer, or just as they exit that they answer. Sometimes those are on paper, or sometimes they just talk to me at the door, or sometimes in the pre times when they could still have phones, I would get them to answer those on Google Classroom. I also use a lot of assessment as in my classroom. So that's using assessment as the learning itself. So kids assessing themselves or their peers. We spend a lot of time in the beginning parts of band talking about what quality assessment of themselves and others looks like, how to do it constructively, and how to do it kindly. So we do a lot of verbal assessment as about themselves or others. Some other ways I do that would be like roses and thorns. Sometimes we do those verbally. I'll say, like, we'll play a section and say, what were the roses? So the good things, and what were the thorns, the bad things. I find that kids really get stuck on thorns. So we try really hard I force them to say good things before they say bad things. And they have to say more good things than bad things as well. Or similar is 2 stars and a wish. I've seen that worksheet float around lots. Sometimes I'll get them to physically write those sheets out, and sometimes we just talk about it. I use thumb indicators, so like indicating with their thumbs. Did that go really good, not so good, like really bad, or just a quick out of five. Those are just a quick way to check in with the kids, how they're doing, or raise your hand if that went well or didn't go well, that kind of stuff. Or sometimes rehearsal logs. I use those for assessment as learning. Those could look like, what went well in band today, what didn't go well, what's my strategy for fixing that before next time, that kind of thing. I did make some copies of these assignments later coming up. You can see what they look like. And then the more formal assessment of, which is more when we're thinking about the report card type assessments. These are going to be like playing tests or written assignments that are bigger picture things. So looking at more outcomes all at once. Some playing tests, a lot of my playing tests I do right in class. I used to do more big ones that kids would send in to me, and I found they were a lot of work for me, not really authentic for them because they're used to playing in their sections with the band. And now all of a sudden I've ripped away everybody else and they have to play it by themselves. And they took me forever to mark, and I found that their grade was about the same either way. So I've tended to go to more towards playing more playing tests, but they're smaller things in class. Most of my kids are fine doing that in class in front of their peers because I've worked really hard to build a culture where that's just normalized and what we do, and we don't talk badly about anybody's tests. Like everybody's just doing their best. But I do have a few kids where that the idea of playing in front of their peers just makes them so very nervous. So I do allow the option of emailing me videos of those things or just doing it quickly before or after class away from their peers. That doesn't bother me. Um, and then written assignments, things like performance reflections where they're reflecting on, multiple pieces over a longer period of time. And then the occasional like theory assignment or composing type assignment. Any questions about any of those things so far? Nothing? Okay. So there's just a quick like worksheet I made with the roses and thorns thing. I just threw that together on Canva. If anyone wants that, they're welcome to contact me and I'll just give you the link. No sense in making one on your own. Here's what a band concert evaluation might look like. They usually do one after every major performance, but I try to make them a little bit different every time so they don't get too boring. Here's like a shorter version of that, just checking in on them and kind of in the middle of the semester how things are going, setting goals. Here's some non-performance based assessments. We were doing American River songs. So these are all things that were discussed in class, checking that they kind of, yeah, they know what's going on in the piece. They know what the terms mean, that kind of stuff. So that's hitting more of some of your making outcomes, but also some of your like connecting and historical stuff too. A rubric for a playing test. So these are my bigger picture, more summative playing tests where I'm looking at multiple things at once, as opposed to my smaller ones where I might be strictly looking at did they play the rhythm right, or did they do that crescendo, or am I hearing accents, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's kind of the end of that first chunk. Anybody have any comments or questions so far? Okay, here's more, this is my more favorite thing to talk about. If you know me, you know that I'm very type A and I like to stay very organized. And staying organized helped me be a better teacher and be a better assessor because I didn't have a million pieces of paper flying around everywhere. So these are some of the systems and strategies that I use to manage teaching so many people. My favorite tool that I use in my classroom, this is probably the third time Janet's heard me present on this particular thing, is I use an app on my iPad called iDocio, or iDocio. I'm not actually sure how you say it, but it's spelled like that. And that's what I use to keep all of my data organized in my classroom. So everything lives in one place. It has my seating plans, my grade book, my attendance, and any other notes that I need to make about kids. It's super customizable to how you want to use it. I have color coding systems and symbol systems that make sense for my brain in there. It has integrated rubrics. It works with Google Classroom. Unfortunately, it doesn't connect to PowerSchool, which is our grading software. But other than that, it's been a great tool for me. So I have some screenshots of what that looks like. So here's my attendance page, which isn't assessment related, but maybe it is. At a glance, you can see, how many classes a kid has missed and how that's impacted their learning. So you can see like, yes, they're here. No, they're not, or I use stars for an excused absence. This is a picture of a gradebook page. Each of the colors is associated with one of the wings of the curriculum. So I can look at this and on a glance tell, oh man, we haven't done a creativity assignment for a while, or we haven't done a making assignment for a while. So that's what that is there. And I have colors systems here too, like this blue dash means this kid didn't do this, but they're excused from that assignment, or this star saying they haven't done this assignment, it's missing. And within iDochio, I can also add annotations or attach things to specific assignments and people. So you can see that this was a grade 5 assignment, but in pitter patter rounds, I made a note. So this little dot shows up and it says like they had good pictures, but they didn't know the words. So I can put comments attached to assignments, or I can attach resources. So you can see in this composition project, I've actually attached a picture of the assignment itself. I don't always take pictures of every assignment, but I might if it was exceptionally good work. Or more often, I'll take a picture when it's exceptionally poor work. So when the parent says, why didn't, what happened to this mark? I can show them the page of ripped up, scribbled on work. So you can put that there, or even just a reference back to yourself once you've handed things back to the kids. And you can attach videos. So if you want to just record like playing assessments right in that app, you can, and then it's all in one place. It also has rubrics, so I can pull up my grade book and just quickly here in class, just tap, tap, tap in the rubric right there. Any questions about that app before I leave that one? No, okay. I also use Google Classroom, which I think is pretty common these days, although I hear some schools are starting to move away from it. We still use it in our division. So I will use Google Classroom to collect the larger playing tests. It's a place where they can just be all collected at once. It has built-in rubrics. If you've never used those, that's well worth your time. Set them up once and then use them, like make them generic enough so they work across multiple assignments, like work smarter, right? I also like that I can write comments to the students to give like written feedback and they can see that and it lives there, right? And it also has some accountability, so I can see when students turn things in or if edits were made after the fact. If you have policies about late work or whatever, it's just there's no arguing when you can see those things turned in there. I'll also in the pre times when students still had phones, I would do entrance tickets quite often on Google Classroom because it was simple for kids to answer. So if your students still have devices in class, maybe Chromebooks, or you let them use their devices for educational purposes, that's a quick way to collect data, just checking in if they remember something from last class. Or sometimes I even have them record quick little videos and send them at the start of class. Like, we worked really hard on measure 4 and 5 last time, like make a recording, send it in. And those aren't summative, but it's just me checking in on how those things are going. Go. So this is what an assignment would look like there if you've never used it. There's a rubric attached. I can see how many have been turned in, how many haven't been. There it is. There's what one of the rubrics might look like. And if you don't use Google Classroom, something that I found really useful has been Dropbox file requests. So you can set these up to say like, all right, we're taking in playing test number 1, and it automatically will organize all of the files into a folder called playing test number 1 with their names attached to it. So it stays really organized. So what I do is put a link on my class website. Like click here to submit test. And then it takes them to a link that looks like this. I can press choose files. They upload them right from their phone or from their computer. It forces them to put their name on it and their email. So it's not, you're not just getting 30 files named playing test. It has, like, their name gets attached to it. And then they get a thanks, you're done message, and all without them needing to have a Dropbox account. So they don't need to have Google accounts or any accounts to do this. They don't have to log into anything, so no forgotten passwords. And then it all just ends up in a beautiful little folder in my Dropbox. So that's a great option if you're not using something like Dropbox or like Google Classroom. Any question about that there? Okay. And managing all the paper. So again, we teach, 100 to 300, 400 students. So this is the system that I use for managing all the paper that comes into my room. Paper only lives in one of 4 places in my room. I have trays for each class, the to be distributed. So after I make my photocopies or whatever, assignments go in there. Once students hand things in, I have one single bin that everything goes in my classroom, whether it's an assignment, a fundraising paper, whatever, it goes in that bin. And then my personal policy is that when I leave my classroom at the end of the day, nothing stays in that box. It all gets sorted to where it belongs. So, like inbox 0 in my physical mailbox every day. If it's something to be marked, I have a to be marked folder. I mark them and they move to the to be returned folder. So I never have stacks of paper all over my desk. It's one of those 4 places. And that helps manage all the papers when there's so many kids and so many different classes. I'm trying to think how many different classes I have. I guess nine different classes, with senior band and jazz band, including 3 different grades within that. So it's a lot of different things to keep track of. It's just these file folders is what I use to keep my to be marked and to be returned. And then I just have these stacking trays that are from Dollarama on my desk for to be handed out, and one single basket for everything to be handed in. Okay, so moving on to parent communication. I think the most important thing about parent communication is being proactive. Don't wait until something's gone bad until you contact them. If at all possible, and I know it's not always possible because we teach so many people, but try to let your first communication with parents be a positive one. Reach out earlier in the year, let them know something that's going well with their kid, especially if it's a kid that doesn't often get positive referrals from the school. Try to contact home with something good if you can. And even if it's not good, don't let the report card be the first time that their parents hearing about the bad thing. If they're missing assignments or acting up in class, don't let November be the first time they know about that. The poor report cards should not be a surprise. Um, Something I learned from my final student teaching placement with Andrew Clausen was when you have to have difficult communication with your class or with your kids, you should actually take time to lesson plan those those communications. So what is the outcome you're looking for from that communication with the parent? And what's the best way to communicate that? Just like you would with your lesson. And how do you know you've achieved that after the phone call or the email? Phone calls are great because you lose some, or like you can interpret tone better over the phone or in person. I also like emails because you get the paper trail. So pros and cons to both of those, but um yeah, try to let the first contact be positive because parents are gonna have a better reaction to negative news later if you can. Any questions about parent communication?
Justine, I was just going to mention too, you talked about phoning the parents, but that the email was a good form of paper trail.
Mm-hmm.
What I've done sometimes too is that I've done the phone call and then done a paper trail, like done a summary of the phone
Yeah.
call that I
Yeah.
sent off to the parents, just to make sure everything is clear to both
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. You can just send a follow-up email or yeah, an email saying like, enjoyed our phone call, like, it was good to hear about these things, blah blah blah. Like looking forward to this happening. So then everybody's on board. And if the situation carries on, like, yeah, you have dated paperwork that communication was made. I also, maybe because I work in a small school, so it's not too overwhelming for my admin, I often loop my admin in on difficult things. That might not be appreciated by all administration, particularly in really big schools, but my principal's very open to just, I put them in like the BCC line and just let them know, just forwarding this to you, like not asking you to do anything, just putting it on your radar. I had one right in September. I had a pretty upset parent kind of out of nowhere. And I replied and it was all well, but just sort of just forwarding this to you, just so this is on your radar. Like it was kind of out of nowhere and that was strange. So here you go. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with that either. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Report cards. Those are coming up. I think my first set is due 2 weeks from now, I think. As someone who teaches 5 to 12, I feel like I'm always writing report cards, and many of us are in that situation. So I write report cards 7 times a year. I have 7 rounds of report cards. So it feels constant. I used to stress a lot about report, thinking that they were this huge, grand, important thing. And I've started to care less about report cards. Not care less necessarily, but just realizing that all they are is a snapshot of student learning in that moment. Um, they're not always the most reflective. Sometimes you really know it's just because that kid missed handing something in, or they just bombed a playing test for no reason. So I try very much to look at them as a snapshot, especially the number part, the grades part. Um, the comment means more to me, where I can communicate really what's going on with that kid. Um, but yeah, the report card's not everything. And for those that teach in the younger grades where we have to report on all 4 wings, I also used to really stress about reporting on all 4 of those every report card. And I found that I wasn't doing a very authentic job of that. I was just doing stuff because I needed a mark in that box. So I've stopped doing that. And my admin is okay with that. Um, and that might not be the case in yours. So I would check about that first. But sometimes I felt we might be just doing one assignment in a wing in a term or in a quarter. And I don't think that's an adequate way to put a number in general. So in some quarters, I might not comment on all or have a number for all 4 wings, if that makes sense. Okay, so the structure that I use for my report card comments, I'm sure you've heard this before, but to do a strength, a weakness, and a next step. I try to focus on the positive as much as I can. I try to use language from the curriculum, and I try to focus on the outcomes, not behaviors. If you're brand new to report cards, there is a separate place where behaviors are reported on. And we are trying to, we are supposed to try to separate those 2 things. But sometimes I do acknowledge that the behaviors are affecting that outcome. So I will sneak some wording in, due to this behavior, the student's not showing this outcome. To make my life simpler, I try to make sort of a general comment that I can use for everybody in a class and then modify from there. They end up looking quite different for every kid, but we start with like a basic comment, commenting on, 2 or 3 outcomes or assignments, and what we met with those, what outcomes we met with those assignments, and then just modify from there for each student, and for, the advice for each instrument might be different. So I write all my comments in Excel, and then I transfer those over to PowerSchool. That way I know that kids aren't seeing those before they're supposed to if there's a tech glitch. And I find I can copy paste them really quickly from Excel to PowerSchool. And I can also look like left to right from term 1, 2, 3, 4, and see how that kid's progressed over the year, and make sure that I'm either referencing changes in previous comments or trying to not say the exact same thing in the exact same way again. So the last thing I have on my slides here is actually just a bunch of my report card comments. So I don't know if that's helpful for people to have or to see, but I can leave them up here, or if you want to screenshot them or whatever, just to have some ideas. So this would have been, so Jacob was a grade 7 student last year. So you can see his term 1, term 2, and term 3 comments. Yeah, so these would have looked pretty similar through different kids, but obviously different advice because, he plays a trumpet and not a flute or whatever. And you can kind of see like how things progress through the year. I see some people reading, so I'll just leave it for a second. So that was a grade 7 kid. These are, this was a grade 8 kid, so a slightly more advanced kid. I picked this guy also because he was a struggling kid. It was hard to find a lot of positive for him. A good kid, not that he wasn't trying, but just naturally it did not come to this kid. So trying to keep it positive, trying to keep them motivated, but struggled. That last kid, Jacob, was a nice kind of middle of the pack kid. And then I've got, this is a high school kid. So this is a strong student in grade 11. So you get four terms because he's in high school. A little more lengthy comment because we do more. You can see me referencing like a specific assignment, the circle of fourth assignment, or a specific piece. You know, he's demonstrating this thing through this piece. Yeah, and there we go.